Uh, Moving on to the next session, I would like to call upon stage Charu Raizada, VP Corporate Communications, Markets and Markets, Ina Chakravarti, Group Head of PR and Communication, Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan Attorneys, Sunanda Rao Ardem, Founder and CEO, Seraphim Communications, Gaurav Nijavan, VP Marketing, Stashfin, Deepak Jolly, Founder and Director of Consortia Advisory. It would be a pleasure if you guys can please come on stage and have your seats. Please consider this musical chair. Any chair you like, you can sit on that. All right, we have two more members.
And so, you know, as employees, the minimum we expect from our organizations that there's the culture of diversity and empathy. And organizations have also woken up to the fact that today's workforce is far more diverse. They need to communicate in a way which is acceptable. They need to communicate in a way which people are, they need to relook at their policies. And, I have been told that ideally, this is not a conversation we should be having, but we don't live in an utopian world, and I'm sure we're going to get there in due course of time. But today, I'm going to move to our panelists, and we're going to talk about how they are making inclusivity and diversity as part of their story on a day-to-day basis, not just in their organizations, but also in their clients' organizations, because we truly have a diverse panel. We're going to try and understand some of the challenges and look at the creative solutions. I have with me Gaurav here, Sunanda, and Ina. We're going to just wait for Mr. Jolly, Deepak Jolly, to join in. And before he does that, I think we're going to start off with the first question. And I'm going to really go back in time when in 1990, when Morgan Stanley came under a litigation because of some of the issues they had with their policies where diversity is concerned. And recently, we had Google in news as well. But, organizations are now relooking at their policies. They're relooking at the way things are happening. And my first question to you, Ina, and I really want to kick off with, how do you ensure that you are engaging with different stakeholders to create a culture of respect and inclusivity in your communications, both internally and externally?
Thank you, Charu, for the question. Well, I think as communicators, for us, the first and the most important thing is to keep in mind that we have to treat every individual as a person. What happens most of the time is that we start objectifying things, keeping our strategy in mind or keeping the organizational goals in mind. In that whole run, we forget how humans feel. What do they want? They want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel important. And I think that is integral part of communication to ensure that we are including everybody in our communications. It is important that we create a culture, a space for internal as well as external stakeholders to have that confidence that, yes, their voice will be heard. Communication today, a lot of time is something that we create as strategy. But that strategy needs to trickle down. We need to have a commitment from our leadership, from the senior management. They have to buy into that. There are stereotypes, many stereotypes. Breaking that stereotype is something that only the top management can do. But yes, from there, the entire process needs to trickle down. And that is where communication plays a critical role. We see that, I come from the corporate side, so we keep seeing how we have a lot of partners. For example, a PR agency for a corporate communication team, a digital agency, events agency. Having said so, I have seen a lot of people, when I was on the PR side, treating their agencies as vendors. I am sorry, that's not how we create inclusive teams.
Right.
When we say that my PR agency is my extended team, they are my partners, that is when I'm giving them the space and the voice. And that is what inclusivity is all about. So it's all about having a very thoughtful process or a thought towards others as being human. So being humane, I think, is the core of all communications.
Deepak sir, I'll come to you. You've had a long run right from the 1990s to today, and so much has happened. How have policies changed? How have the conversations been molded? What's the change?
No, that's a great question, and I think what I think is most important is my grooming was done in Unilever. And that was a time when people said a Unilever person was the biggest in demand when the liberalization happened. Why? Because the first thing as a part of the culture was your head is on the shoulders. I see people getting bigger and bigger, and they say, wow, I've reached here, and many people are looked down upon. The first, I think, the most important thing as a founder, I find, is that if I hire a CEO of my company, will he look down upon people? Or will he be a part of them? Will he be a problem solver? So, for whatever reasons, we decided that let the founders run the company for a while. And let's, in last 5 years, at Consortia Advisory, we built a culture of cohabiting, a culture of trust, a culture of diversity. I mean, I must tell you, 45% of my team is women. Again, diversity. In a 40-member team, my team is across India. I mean, I'm the Keralite teaching Haryanvi how to eat a biryani, which is from his place or his native place. I think that counts. These are things which count in building an organization. Again, I was lucky that after my, in the 90s, 80s, I joined Unilever. So I've seen 4 or 5 generations of, corporates which have seen professionalism. I've seen Sunil Mittal, I was his direct report, and I found, a lot of attempt to bring in that culture. Even the Indian companies have taken it like, get the best HR head, let's be a part of it, create inclusion. I think the biggest issue which happens is when an employee goes with a mindset of inclusion, and rightly so, but then he carries a lot of baggage with him. And that the company's owner says, okay, guys, this is the way you were brought up in this company. This is what we do. This is how we will include you in our thought process. This is the way we will help you to climb the ladder, and this is the way you will reach the top. I think all these factors I've seen, which I included it as a part of the thought process. Again, as a startup, I could not hire a HR head for first 3 years. But when the time was ripe, I said, go for it. But go for a good one. I waited 6 months to hire a good director for HR. But I said, if I have to hire someone, she or he should be making my employees as inclusive as possible. And again, should be able to permeate through this maze of diversity. And in India, diversity means a lot. There's a north-south divide, there's a east-west divide, there's a divide of gender, there's a divide of caste, creed, and color. So I think we have to, I think we are a long way from what is West achieved. But again, I think it's an evolving process.
You raised a very interesting point about the role of leadership, but I'm going to hold on to that and come to you, Gaurav, to find out that where tonality is concerned, the way we use our voice, the way we make a point, it could be misinterpreted. So how do we ensure that we are conscious, inclusive, and able to put across things in a right way?
Right. First of all, good evening to everyone. I think it's my delight to be a part of this inclusivity and diversity topic debate with such a diverse group as well. I would like to just take a step back, Charu here, and figure out, the subtle nuances between diversity and inclusivity. Are we saying diversity equals inclusivity? I don't think so. What happens is that you can be as diverse as an organization. You can have people of different race, gender orientation, or different genders, people coming from different regions as well. Um, and you'll call yourself a diverse organization, right? But it's really, inclusivity is something, it's really how you treat your people, right? For example, you can have all the kind of policies, right? You can have paternity policy, you can have maternity policy, you can have give holidays to people from a certain religion, which is not an official of for the whole group as well. You could do things like these. But are your employees actually feeling guilty of taking those rights, which should have been just rights, and you are giving it as a privilege as well, right? So when it's how you treat everyone and make them give the power to them. That is where real inclusivity will come in. So, for example, and a lot of us have been a victim of making the same mistakes again and again. That we are addressing our customers with a he or him rather than having a generic tone to it, or in a meeting saying guys instead of when you have women also a part of that meeting group as well. So we've all made those mistakes, and this tonality is something that you may not understand it at that point of time, but it hits people, right? Especially people who've come probably from like tier 2, tier 3 cities, and maybe the education level hasn't been up to speed for that matter. It's also the job of the leaders or the organization to educate them so that they don't make the same mistake of treating a person with a diverse sort of a thinking or experience, because the core remains the same. It's just the experiences of those people have been different, and you never know how you will offend those people as well, right?
Right. So Nanda, you've been working with international markets. What are the major differences when it comes to diversity and equality?
Thank you so much. A very warm, heartfelt gratitude to Adgali that we have finally got back to events. This is for me the greatest delight. See, the thing is, while we were having our initial talks and we were discussing, I felt there are two sides to look at things. One, if we look at, there is no major difference per se between East and West, India, abroad, West, East, whatever, Orient, Occident. India has a huge advantage over the West. From what I have seen, from the people, clients, societies I have lived in. We, from the very beginning, from our childhood, we are exposed to communicating with different sorts of people, be it diversity in age, religion, caste, societies, classes. So India has that advantage over many other countries which they look at India in bewilderment. Now the next stage is how do you get diversity towards inclusion, which Gaurav rightly pointed out, and Ina also, and Sir also. How do you actually bring that conversion? On the one hand, we are still grappling in India with taking diversity to inclusivity. I personally feel there's that very big word called tolerance that we need to bridge between diversities. For me, when I have to define that loosely, in an organization, diversity is the what of an organization. What is it comprising of? And inclusivity is how an organization is making its structure more diverse. So when we are talking about, and when I am observing as an observer, we have served clients from different countries, from different, from startups to huge organizations, to political organizations, to social organizations. One thing comes out, yes, we are, even now in the panel, we are discussing about man, woman. What about the entire LGBTQ representation? We are not even putting that out in the sphere. So I think that's where probably the Western or the European nations have started recognizing. Each and every, in fact, D&I has become a very important part of any organization that wants to go towards ESG. right? So that the great place to work in. We have, giving a simple example, look at the PR industry here in India. We are 70% women, but are we actually represented in the top management? Are we getting a share in being able to have decision-making powers? So these are the kind of questions we want. I know we want to work towards solution. We are all working in our own way. But there is a long way to go. However, we need to understand our strengths and work towards.
So obviously, I mean, just having a DNY policy is just not enough. I mean, and you know, if the leadership does not believe it, then it's really on paper. And so, Ina, let me ask you, you've been working in a very challenging environment. How are you communicating the value of being truly diverse in your organization? What have been your key challenges and learnings?
Well, just taking a step back and telling the kind of organization I am, it's a law firm where it is almost 75 to 80% are lawyers, and it's a firm which is a TAM-BRAM firm. Now, having said so, that community has, I mean, since it's a founder-driven, owner-driven firm, there are ethos, DNA, which is very conservative. Conservative to people who are outsiders to this entire system. So hence, it becomes even more important for a communications professional like me to bring in the message of diversity now and inclusion. But that is not possible till the time the senior leadership or the management does not acknowledge it. So the baseline remains conditioning the leadership. And how do you do that? It is an extremely big challenge, of course. But yes, fortunate we are that we have tools, we have coachings which help us build those ethos. So first and foremost, I think what we have started doing within the organization is having constant conversations within the HR fraternity, the HR team, communications, the senior management, apprising them of where the gaps are or what the misses are, and then trying to find solutions which will help bridge those gaps. And I think over time, I mean, I have been with this organization 2 years in my prior stint and now about another year, and there is a slight cultural shift that we are seeing. It is becoming far more liberal. It is giving people space, and it is all happening because the senior management has opened its arm to welcome those changes.
So, is it only the leadership, or should each and every employee be accountable? Sir, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. You said...
Should each and every be accountable where diversity and inclusion is concerned? Because at the end of the day, everybody's actions matter or they don't.
Absolutely. Because without that, it may start from the top. You may say it is top down, but there are a few things which go bottoms up. So, you know, one thing which I used to do always in my, the companies I worked for, whichever teams I would lead, I would do a small offsite for them, which would be learning and a lot of fun. Because one thing as a part of culture, if you are building, and I don't know, it is like she said, it's a very kind of conservative TAM-BRAM company. But I have worked with TAM-BRAMs like Indra Nui. She was my boss in PepsiCo. But, you know, so the question is how you understand what she wants and what is the message she wants to give down the entire organization. The good news is that, you know, so now let's come to talk about the clients. I'm a communications and an advocacy firm. So I have got, say, about 30, 40 clients where I work with 40 CEOs. And with these 40 CEOs, when we work, we look at a messaging not only to the outside world, but how do you internalize it? And many times I have seen that the CEOs and the CFOs are so mindful of, the kind of investors that they forget that what impact it will have on the internal audience. So we tell them, look, you need a balancing out. And that is something what we bring to the table, because that is a very critical spot. Again, as I said, Rome was not built in a day. I think it's the slow process, how you absorb the employee. And I think, I would give an example of one of the finest CEOs who worked in India, Suman Sinha, who was the CEO of PepsiCo for 10 years. And he says, in Pepsi, in those days when we were there, we have so much of passion that anybody who is not living up to the passion, up to say 1.5 years, will get ejected out automatically. And that's what builds the confidence that, so everybody's 5 fingers are different. But I saw people of very conservative background changing to the environment, because this is what it was. If PepsiCo was irreverent, I found 50% people at least becoming near that, if not. But that is the DNA of the system. And let me tell you, 2 companies I worked, and that is where inclusivity and diversity matters. We have a WhatsApp group of leavers. I write something on the Unilever group today. I have a problem. 10 people are referring numbers of people. This is not so in many new age companies I've worked with. Even the finest companies, and even the technology companies you think about, I wouldn't like to name them, but the fact is, these are the companies which contributed, their leaders contributed to building a strong bond culture, and they permeated the values. Because nothing can, work on inclusivity till the time you foster 7 or 8 values in a company or a system. That's the first beginning. Now, whether you, diversity I find is much easier once the values have been ingrained in the employees. And that's the critical piece.
No, absolutely. And this brings me back to us communicators. And I want to understand that do we somewhere need to step back and re-skill ourselves, reinvent ourselves to be able to come up with strategies which are more in line?
Can I just add?
Yes,
I've been 40 years in the industry, 39. I have reinvented myself every year. Carry on.
Yes, definitely, Charu. So I'll also touch upon a few factors here. We spoke about internal communication. Now, from an external communication as well, what a brand really stands for. And a lot of things that the brand throws out or talks about is also driven by sometimes personal bias of the marketeers or the communicators as well. So you would have seen, right, very recently, there's been a Dio ad, which was all around men, like, sexism. People haven't learned it, right? So this point about, upskilling ourselves, it's also about learning from others' mistakes so that, you don't keep making the same mistake again and again. Because, we know that, Dio brands have gone to a route where sexism has been coming out. And quite recently, it was so offensive that ASCAI and, all the regulatory authorities had to pull the ad completely off, right? So that is one example. Now, I also worked with the beer and beverages industry, right? And over there as well, and it is also changing now, that a lot of communication or the visual imagery would be around men having good time, right? And that somehow alienates the ladies and says that, we don't think ladies would enjoy the beer, which is not true, right? And you'll see the wait staff, in from a hotel or a restaurant, industry perspective, he will give the beverages menu to the man and the food menu to the female. So these are a lot of training things that needs to trickle down right from the senior management to the guy who's actually, because like a consumer will not see the strategy, he'll see the execution, right? He or she will see the execution of what is happening. Now in BFSI industry as well, the imagery that has been going around is a man is giving the card to the wait staff or whatever. Like he's buying, and a lot of women you'll see in the kitchen, in the visual imagery, right? Or ordering groceries. So all of that needs to change. So this can only come if we upskill ourselves, right? Or get to know what is happening elsewhere. Now, even as communicators, right? For example, metaverse has become a big deal, right? But how do we ensure that the real world that we were in, the same mistakes don't go there? And so the idea is to learn from the past as well, from a communication standpoint. Yeah.
Thank you for those points. Ananda, you want to add to that?
My mind is buzzing with ideas, and I'm like trying to recapitulate everything. As far as, see, I do agree with most of our panelists here. I still feel a lot of onus of change still lies with the leadership. Let me just the leadership is the one that's the driving force, right? There needs to be, I understand, like, top to bottom, but giving a very short example, I can take anybody on my team, I ask them to make a presentation. The presentation is probably done by a junior level person. And then it's taken to your supervisor, who's further taking it to the vice president, who's further taking it to the client. Eventually, the guy who actually made the initial presentation does not get the feedback. The vice president who's actually presented the whole presentation to the client or wherever has not understood the whole idea behind the draft, the first draft. A lot of it depends on how the leadership is actually coming back and giving you. Has to be a two-way feedback culture, first of all. Secondly, you can't have 10 people from Harvard sitting in the boardroom, because then you know where it is going, right? So there is no diversity or inclusion. You can forget about diversity. It can be male, female, anybody. But if you have 10 people from Harvard, what diversity and inclusion do you expect in a company? So I think it has to be more, the onus there lies on the leadership primarily. The second thing about, India and why aren't we really learning lessons? That's the last point I'll make, sorry to make it longer, is, on the one hand, we say India is a huge country. See the sheer volume of work that we are doing. See the sheer number of people. Smaller countries, more developed countries do not have to work with those challenges that we have. We have mailing lists of 10,000 people for one sector, one beat. This is something that, it's definitely a very big advantage, but also makes our work harder. So I'm just trying to bring the various factors, and we really need to have the skill. And lastly, when Seraphim is looking out for any kind of person to employ, I am primarily looking at people who have a diverse skill set. I would love if somebody would come in with I myself am not from the conservative background, as Mr. Jolly was saying. I myself come from a very, unconservative background. So, a singer, an author, a documentary filmmaker, we have had people from all walks of life. So I think that diversity of mindset, skill set, plus mentality is, for me, the key. Thank you.
Thank you. Interestingly, what you've pointed out also is that somewhere we are conditioned in our minds to say that, okay, only a person from the best of these schools is possibly the right person to be in the room. And we forget somewhere that education needs to be, we need to look at diversity in education as well. I'm going to just end this panel with a round robin and ask each of you for your suggestions on how we could really reinvent and how we could come up with better ideas and suggestions when it comes to internal and external communications.
Thank you. Can I start? Yeah. So, I think the best part of reinventing oneself is to first look at what you did in the past. And then look at where the world is going and where are your own gaps. And these gaps, if you can fill maybe about 30% or 30% or so, it's a great job. let me tell you, one should not be shy of saying that, okay, you know, this is the way. So people have earlier used to have longer communication, longer dialogues. Now it's the time of shots. What are they called? In shots. In shots. 100 news items in 10 minutes, you know. So the fact is, in this unipolar, pluralistic democracy of India, how do you keep your point in short? Teach your employees about that, because they can take ages, but they will not come to the point. So I think the first and foremost is that. You change yourself, you ask change for people you work with. They bring that change. And then I think what is important is, I'm not a HR specialist, but let me tell you, I work with so many CEOs and they tell me their personal issues. And I work with them, okay, how we can change, even make a 10% difference to their life. Believe it or not, we get appreciated much more than just being consultants on advocacy or PR. And that's the way to go. Over to you.
Well, I would just like to highlight two words here. One is disruption, and second is transparency. These are two critical aspects which one needs to keep in mind and internalize into the system, whether it is the management, whether it is HR policies, whether it is communications. And that is how we can really bring about change.
Great.
Yeah. All right, sure. So I think I'll spend just 2 minutes on this one, because this is very important. Because you know, any organization or a brand, whatever the purpose might be, right? For example, in fintech, our purpose is financial inclusion, right? So we have to look inside and say that, are we practicing what we are preaching, right? Like and it's a thought that came to our mind when we were going to launch a women card, right? First of all, why should there be a need of launching a women card? Like, card is card, right? But then we've not really reached that stage. It would be a utopian stage that, you know, wherein we don't need to talk. We don't need to do these kind of sessions, right? But we're not there, right? So we felt that, and then how do you communicate it into the right manner? So when we were thinking of a name to put there, which is going to be Live Boundless, the name of the card itself, we felt that, you know, is it really true to, you know, what we want to launch? And that's where the whole communication aspect happened. Women are used to be listening to really inappropriate things in their lives, right? Right from when they were born, right? For example, a woman can't drive. A woman can't be good with numbers. Once married, she should just, you know, stay away from work and all of that. So somehow, somewhere, all of this is actually bounding you down and lowering down your confidence. So the brand purpose has to be, can you, you know, put that inside, that, you know, the unspoken truth that is out there, and, you know, create your product or your communication, like on the lines of Live Boundless, to give that kind of a confidence to a person who's you know, and give the freedom or, you know, flexibility to be a part of a bigger financial inclusion or the overall inclusion for any brand that the purpose might be. Yeah.
Sunanda.
I'll keep it very short, 10 seconds. In this age of social media, every CEO has a LinkedIn handle, every CEO has a Twitter handle. So it's not like they're not approachable. We can, you know. So when we talk about inclusion, it is the entire philosophy of inclusion. I mean, am I approachable? No. You can write blogs. CEOs are writing blogs. We have like paragraphs after paragraphs. Is he actually touching the lives of his employees or not? I think a little bit of thought has to be given to that. Plus, as I said in my previous round, that it's about diversity and personalities. We need to kind of, you know, enhance the personalities of the people who work with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think, to my mind, talent is truly genderless. And talent needs to be devoid of all labels. And my key takeaways are the words tolerance, transparency, and, you know, right from the leadership to each one of us needs to be truly accountable. And the onus lies on us as communicators to bring in that change, to ensure that this is a part of the culture, the way we communicate both internally and externally. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audiences.
What an amazing value-adding sessions.
Thank you.
Make some noise for these amazing panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Charu Raizada, Ina Chakravarti. Sunanda Rao, Gaurav Nijavan, Deepak Jolly, sir.